All right, USC, give us some good news. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking USC football just a few days following the final National Signing Day in February. We've got Alicia De Artola on the line from Reign of Troy. Alicia, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. So if we combine the season and combine the offseason thus far, not necessarily great news for USC, not a great look for the rest of the nation in looking at Los Angeles and the paramount program in the Pac-12, not necessarily the best program right this second, but the program obviously in the Pac-12 is at USC with the Cliff Kingsbury undoing and unraveling of the hiring, although it's totally understandable. He's going to run off to an NFL head coaching job. And then the recruiting class not meeting expectations following 5 and 7. And just your thoughts about maybe what everyone's perceiving versus what may actually be in play right now at USC.
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough season, a tough start to the off season. I think the national perception is probably not far from where things are. Maybe it's even, I wonder if people in the national college football world understand how panicked USC fans are right now. Being in the USC fan base right now is a whirlwind of, I think, pessimism and negativity and concern, because it's not just what's going on at the football level. There's growing concern about what's going on with athletic director Lynn Swann and his control of the athletics program, particularly his involvement in the football program. There's growing concern about USC as a university. They don't have a university president right now. The university itself is embroiled in a bunch of controversies, and how that all then filters down to what the future of the football program is very, very uncertain, very cloudy. So yeah, the USC right now it looks like a little bit of trouble coming off a 5 and 7 season. That was really bad. The optics of the Cliff Kingsbury situation were very bad, even though, as you say, who could have believed that he would get a head coaching job? Like, that's, I think Arizona's reaching there a little bit, but it's still, the way it all played out didn't look good on USC's end. The way that the buyout and letting him interview and all of that, the optics around USC are very bad. Then you run into Brew McCoy signing, enrolling, and then transferring to Texas after 2 weeks. And then you run into the end of recruiting season where USC finishes with their lowest ranked recruiting class since recruiting classes were tracked, essentially. And then they cap it all off with Puka Nacua, the 4-star wide receiver who had been committed to USC since the summer, and he jumps over to a Pac-12 rival in Washington. So it just feels like the dominoes are all falling in the wrong direction from a USC perspective. And if the nation doesn't see it that USC is in crisis, then USC fans certainly think that USC is in crisis.
Yeah, the Kingsbury situation, I think, just happened at the wrong time, considering what else was happening around the program. Because again, anytime you hire someone, then they bail, it's not a good look, regardless of where they go. But then on top of that, as you say, that could not have been foreseen. It certainly wasn't by me. When does an NFL team hire a losing college football coach who did not perform as well as his two predecessors at Texas Tech? That never happens, but it was the right fit for them, they believed, based on his experience with offensive football and what he could do there. It's interesting to note, before we get to recruiting, we might as well dive right into the offensive coordinator situation, because Cliff Kingsbury, obviously prolific at Texas Tech as a quarterback. Graham Harrell, the same, even more so statistically, and he becomes the offensive coordinator. So at least there was some consistency in regards to, we would like to run this style of offense, have this type of dynamic impact and approach to offensive football. Therefore, we're going to go after this style. Graham Harrell, the next guy in line from North Texas.
Yeah, and all things considered, Graham Harrell is probably the best name that USC could have got coming out of the Cliff Kingsbury situation. So kudos to USC for making it happen, because it looked like it wasn't going to happen. And it does show a willingness to embrace the air raid. It does show a willingness to go with this style of system, which there was some skepticism about whether or not USC would persist with the air raid if Cliff Kingsbury wasn't on the board. There was a lot of talk of Jed Fish, who's with the Rams and who was the UCLA's ex-offensive coordinator. And I don't think that name would have incited any excitement for USC fans, but Graham Harrell brings in this exciting style of offensive football. It really suits USC's personnel. USC was already running a hybrid gumbo kind of pro style wannabe spread that didn't really have an identity. So they have all of these athletes to have a really explosive passing offense. They already have the offensive linemen who are built for that kind of spread front. So it makes a lot of sense to get Graham Harrell. The only question that surrounds Graham Harrell is, Cliff Kingsbury has had, how many years of running his own offense, whether as the head coach of Texas Tech or as an offensive coordinator at Texas A&M before that. A lot of experience for him, a lot to show for what he specifically could do with an offense. Graham Harrell comes from North Texas, 2 years as an offensive coordinator, which is more than T. Martin had when USC hired him, but still pretty limited. And he was working under an offensive-minded head coach in Seth Luttrell at North Texas. So this is his first step out into his own control of things. And USC is going to give him control. Clay Helton has said that a couple times now, that he's going to have full control of the offense. Helton is going to step back and be more CEO. And that'll be the interesting thing is, does Graham Harrell now sink or swim? I mean, the track record, if you want to do the Kingsbury comparison, is good, but he still has to prove himself at that level.
And of course, there were few good offensive performances in 2018, especially against quality competition. When you point to the Texas game, when you point to just a number of games, obviously Notre Dame got off to a good start, but faltered in the second half. And not surprisingly, with a very young quarterback, JT Daniels, in play. But even the season before, the red zone performance was poor, even considering a top 3 NFL pick at quarterback, one of the best running backs in the nation, one of the best wide receiver cores in the nation, and still not able to scheme it up in the red zone. And you would think that would be more about approach and play calling than it would be about talent in 2017.
Yeah, absolutely. And there seemed to be, I think it all comes back to the lack of identity. There seemed to be a sense that they didn't know how to get the most out of their athletes. They were trying to pigeonhole some guys. They were trying to rely on having better athletes than the opponent more often than not. And that's why you saw when they would go up against the more equal, the teams that were on more equal footing from a talent perspective, they looked more on equal footing. They couldn't just deal with those mismatches. So that's one thing, that if there's optimism about Graham Harrell coming in, his entire offensive philosophy is about scheming guys open, is about scheming players into situations that gets the most out of them. So it felt like USC wasn't getting the most out of Sam Darnold. It felt like USC wasn't getting the most out of Ronald Jones. It felt like USC wasn't getting the most out of anyone in 2018, this past season. So that's the thing that USC fans and USC obviously is hoping will change in 2019, just getting more out of the incredible. I mean, you just think about USC lost Brew McCoy, they lost Puka Nacua in the recruiting cycle. And yet, if you look at USC's receiving core right now, there is an embarrassment of riches even then. You have Michael Pittman and Tyler Vaughns were top-level wide receiver recruits and have shown that they have that talent. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute stud. Devin Williams, who was a freshman last year, along with Amon-Ra St. Brown, kind of an under the radar, but kid's got talent. So USC is not lacking for immense talent on this offense. They were lacking for, getting anything out of it.